Okay, so imagine this. You wake up one morning, scroll through your phone, and find out your country is at war. A war that didn't start with some big declaration, but with a 2 a.m. tweet. Today, we're going to break down this really chilling analysis of a hypothetical war with Iran set in 2026. And the core argument from the source is just staggering, that the chaos that followed wasn't some mistake, it was the plan. Let's dig into how they make this case.
The source kicks things off with something we can all kind of get, right? That feeling when something huge happens. One minute, your family chat is all about bad jokes and pictures of pets, and the next, boom, it's a war room. Everyone's an expert, talking about supply lines and telling you to stock up on canned goods. It's that whiplash, that sudden lurch from total normalcy into absolute chaos, that really sets the stage for everything that follows.
So how do we unpack all this? Well, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at how a war could even start so fast. Then we have to ask, what about the peace deal that was supposedly happening? After that, we follow the money. Who actually stood to gain from this? That leads us straight into the core idea from the source, that chaos was the objective. And finally, we'll see who got stuck with the bill.
All right, first up, the source describes a conflict that ignited with, just terrifying speed. And not from the Pentagon, but from a social media account.
Just look at this timeline. It is insane. On February 27th, you've got diplomats in Geneva, they're shaking hands, talking about how a deal is right around the corner. Iran had apparently agreed to stop enriching uranium. Peace was in the air. And then, just a few hours later, a tweet goes out at 2 in the morning announcing Operation Epic Wrath. Within 48 hours, more than 1,000 sites in Iran are being hit. Diplomacy wasn't just ignored here, it was flattened by a freight train on purpose.
And make no mistake, this was not some surgical strike. The source calls it a decapitation attempt, aimed squarely at the very top of Iran's leadership. All of this happened with zero approval from Congress, no prep for the public. Americans literally woke up, had their coffee, and found out they were at war. And one of the first moves? Cutting 96% of Iran's internet. Just gone. Instantly plunging 88 million people into darkness and creating total nationwide paralysis.
So you have to ask, why the sudden move? To really get why this was so shocking, you've got to understand the backstory. This wasn't a war because there were no other options. According to the source, it was an attack chosen over a diplomatic path that was actually working.
And the difference is just night and day. On one side, you have the 2015 deal. Iran's program was capped, it was monitored 24/7, and their breakout time, the time it would take to build a bomb, was over a year. But after the US pulled out of that deal, the whole situation flipped. By 2026, the cameras were gone, and according to the source, they had enriched so much uranium that their breakout time was down to just a few weeks. A much scarier picture for sure.
But here's the absolute kicker. Even with things looking that dangerous, the talks in Geneva were apparently making progress. Iran was reportedly ready to get back in line. So the argument here is crucial. The attack wasn't launched because diplomacy failed. It was launched to prevent diplomacy from succeeding. Why? Because a peaceful outcome apparently just wasn't the profitable one for some very powerful people.
Which of course brings us to the biggest question in this whole analysis. If it wasn't for national security, then why do it? You gotta ask, who benefits from a sudden, chaotic war in the Middle East?
The source lays out what it calls a perfect storm of interests. For Israel, you take a nuclear threat off the table. For a president facing problems at home, hey, it's the ultimate distraction. For the arms industry and big oil, it's a financial jackpot, plain and simple. And for a certain group of policymakers, the neoconservatives, it was the moment they'd been working towards for decades.
And the scale of that jackpot, it's just hard to even wrap your head around. The source claims the war cost the U.S. Treasury $43 billion in the first 72 hours. And that money doesn't just vanish into thin air, you know? It flows directly into the bank accounts of defense contractors.
And the oil market reacted instantly. In just 2 days, the price of a barrel of crude oil jumped to $20. If you're an oil company sitting on huge reserves, that's billions of dollars in pure profit you did absolutely nothing to earn. And guess who pays for that? We all do, every time we fill up our cars.
So all of this leads us to the most provocative, the most disturbing part of the entire analysis. The idea that the disastrous aftermath, the power vacuum, the civil war, all of it wasn't an accident. It was the whole point.
This quote, which the source puts in the mouth of a hypothetical defense secretary, just says it all, doesn't it? When he's asked, hey, what's the plan for after the war? The response is basically, that's a dumb question. The job in this new way of thinking isn't to fix what you break. It's just to break it and walk away.
And according to the source, this new doctrine is a direct result of past failures. It's a total contrast to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Back then, the big promise was liberation, democracy, all that. When that turned into a nightmare, it was a huge financial and political mess. The lesson America learned, this analysis claims, wasn't don't invade. It was invade, destroy, and make zero promises. Just wash your hands of the whole thing.
So why on earth would chaos be the goal? Well, from the perspective of the beneficiaries, it actually makes a twisted kind of sense. A stable Iran is a problem, but a fractured Iran deep in a civil war, it can't build a nuke. It can't fund groups like Hezbollah. The constant fear this creates in the region, well, that's a bottomless market for weapons sales. And the best part? If you never promise to create stability, no one can ever blame you when it doesn't happen. No accountability.
So if the architects of this war are cashing in, who's footing the bill for all this planned chaos? The source points to Egypt as a perfect case study for how the consequences ripple out and crush everyone else.
Look at this domino effect. It's immediate. The war starts and boom, Israel cuts off natural gas to Egypt, using it as a political tool. Boom, revenue from the Suez Canal tanks. Boom, the currency collapses. Suddenly, Egypt, a country not even in the war, has to find $3 billion it doesn't have, just to keep its power grid from failing.
And then the spin starts. This brand new crisis is immediately used to justify old decisions. The official line becomes, see, this is why we spent all those billions on weapons. But the source tears that argument apart. Iran was never a direct threat to Egypt's military. And when Egypt's real economic lifeline, the Suez Canal, was in trouble, did they use all those expensive weapons to protect it? Nope.
So when you break down that $10 billion arms bill, what was it really for? According to this analysis, a tiny sliver of it was for actual defense. The rest? It was about doing political favors, buying the wrong weapons that cost a fortune to even operate, and something much, much simpler.
And here it is. The source claims the real engine driving all this is what it calls the economics of commissions, a simple 5% cut. You put a 5% commission on a multi-billion-dollar deal, and you create a whole network of people who get rich by making sure the country keeps buying more weapons, whether it needs them or not. It's a self-feeding system. So when you put it all together, the final, devastating conclusion of this analysis is that what we're looking at isn't war as we used to think of it. It's a business model. A business where the product being sold is instability itself, and the profits aren't measured in territory or influence, but in cold, hard cash. Billions of it.
And that leads us with one last, really uncomfortable question to think about. If this analysis is even close to right, if chaos is now designed on purpose, if it's a feature, not a bug, then how do we ever tell the difference between a real crisis that we need to respond to and just another business plan?